affected by the conflict. I know a number of you have also asked me, and we've tried to provide as much detail as possible about how the president has spent his time over the last period since last evening. I think we put out a few details, but just to reiterate for all of you, he closely monitored the events on the ground from both the Oval Office and then back in the residence over the course of last evening. We put out a few details last night, including the fact that he spoke repeatedly with his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan. He also spoke with his U.S. UN ambassador, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, before she gave that powerful speech at the UN last night. He received a briefing from Secretary Austin, Chairman Milley, Secretary Blinken, and his national security advisor around 11 p.m. approximately last evening as well. And as you know, he also spoke with President Zelensky. He continued to monitor closely into the wee hours last night. This morning, as you all know, he met for just about an hour with his national security team, which included both a full table in the room and full members from the cabinet, from the national security team on the screen. During that meeting, as is standard, he received an update from, of course, Defense, Intel, his diplomatic team about the status on the ground, and he has, of course, remained closely engaged with them through the course of the day. As you know, he also had a G7 meeting that lasted a couple of hours this morning, and he also spent an hour this afternoon on the phone with the leaders in Congress, Democratic and Republican leaders in Congress, briefing them on the situation on a secure call, briefing them on the situation on the ground, answering questions they had as well. So that has been his day to date, and he is continuing, of course, to focus on other priorities as president. But why don't we go to you, Zeke?
Thanks, Jen. Just picking up on that, has the president made any additional foreign leader calls today? Has he spoken to President Zelensky since their call last evening?
There's not been another call to President Zelensky. I expect, as you have seen over the past several days, he will continue to have calls with leaders. We will keep you abreast as those happen.
And with the U.S. government saying that it believes that the Russian objective right now is to decapitate the Ukrainian government, does the U.S. believe that President Zelensky at this moment is safe?
We're not going to get into security questions, but we are in touch with President Zelensky, and we are working to provide him a range of support.
And President Zelensky, in addition to calling for the West to cut Russia off from SWIFT, also proposed or called for, demanded, I think the word he used in a tweet, that the U.S. And its allies impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine. I know the president has said that he won't put U.S. boots on the ground in Ukraine to fight Russia. Is Ukrainian airspace in play? Is that something that is subject of any discussions?
We've certainly seen his tweet or his request via tweet, but I don't have an update on that request.
Is that's not off the table? The no-fly zone's not off the table.
Again, I don't have any update on this point in time or status of the discussions. Go ahead.
Thanks. Just a follow-up on troops fast and a few cyber questions.
Sure.
Do you expect NATO to call up a major response force, and how many U.S. troops could be called to help in that effort?
That's really up to NATO. As you know, we have a number of troops, thousands of troops that are on call, but that is a decision made by the NATO alliance.
And the president said, if Putin pursues cyber attacks against our companies, our critical infrastructure, we are prepared to respond. So just clarifying, does that first mean that there has not been any evidence of any cyber attack from Russia against any American companies at this point?
Not that we have identified or attributed at this point in time.
And can you explain?
Aside from past ones that you were fully tracking.
Yeah, I guess in the last 24 hours.
I understand.
And can you explain more of the White House's thinking on kind of this debate in Washington about whether a cyber attack against a NATO ally would trigger an Article 5 response, a response from the alliance?
Well, that, again, is up to the NATO alliance to determine, but obviously a cyber attack does constitute an attack, so that would certainly be a point of discussion among the NATO members.
Okay, one more really fast. On the USAID disaster response you just mentioned, a 17-person team, is that enough? I mean, we're talking about, we've heard you guys talk about the potential of hundreds of thousands of refugees.
You're absolutely right, and I think that's an important point. But what we're trying to do here is provide any incremental update on the status of what our work is. And I'll just note, and you may be fully aware of this, but in terms of humanitarian assistance, we have been the biggest provider of humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. We've provided over $52 million in humanitarian assistance to Ukraine in the past year. Over the past few weeks, we've committed additional funding and supply applies to humanitarian organizations. There's been a specific need and therefore a focus on support services, food, clean water, hygiene, shelter, trauma, primary health care, and we are prepared to certainly provide a significant amount more. So this is just